The Baltimore Ravens embark on one of their most important off seasons in franchise history, and we talk about how the success or failure of 2024 free agency could define the team's success in Lamar Jackson's prime. All that and more coming up next here on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, coming to you from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Thank you so much for being here today on this Monday, start of a new week, making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube and audio form wherever you get your shows. So be sure to subscribe on YouTube, like the video, as well as following along in audio form. You can catch us 5 days a week as well. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. We are officially here. 2024 free agency starts today. Now, the new league year is actually on Wednesday, so 2 days from now. But the legal tampering period, at least we know, there are going to be teams negotiating with agents and talking to players, and that is all allowed starting today at noon. So if you're watching this after the 12 o'clock hour hits, there will still be content for you to consume in this particular episode because I'm going to go more of a general approach today. We'll still talk about free agent targets, and maybe if you're watching this after the fact, you see guys sign, you can come back and see all my freezing cold takes, I guess. But we're going to be talking in the first part of the show about just how massive of an offseason this is for Eric DeCosta and how it could define the success that they have or the failures they have during Lamar Jackson's prime. Then in the second part of the show, we're going to be talking more about free agency targets, positions of need, the latest rumblings surrounding the team at the time of this recording. And then finally, can't forget about Mock Draft Monday. It is Monday, so we got to do our Mock Draft Monday. I did put out a mock draft later at night on Sunday, so we'll talk about the mock draft that I did, and then in that same segment, we'll get to a couple from Twitter. So, wow, crazy. A lot to talk about already. I host Locked On NFL on Mondays, and I had everything recorded. I had talked with our Locked On Steelers host, Chris Carter, who obviously we do crossovers with and is great with Steelers Insight, recorded with him in the afternoon, centered the episode around Russell Wilson, and then the Steelers signed Russell Wilson at like 11:45 p.m. And I'm like, all right, well, time to record essentially half of the show again. So this is how it happens sometimes. In free agency, moves can happen any time of day, any time of night. And the Ravens have certainly done that as well. I've had plenty of times where the Ravens have made a move late at night or early in the morning, and it kind of shifts what plans are. But that's just the way the NFL goes. And for Baltimore, this offseason is going to be, free agency in general, the moves they make, it's all going to be so huge. This is an offseason that is almost, I don't want to go and like overreact to things. The Ravens, this offseason is big, but again, if stuff doesn't happen this offseason, if they kind of strike out, this doesn't ruin their franchise. It doesn't mean that they can't compete after this season. But what they do in free agency, I believe, is going to define a little bit of how this team operates moving forward and just kind of the direction, because I think a couple of things here. This offseason is going to be big, especially for the offense, where we know all the defensive free agents Baltimore has. We know how talented that group is, like Patrick Queen and Geno Stone and Jadeveon Clowney, Calvin Noy, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, for the offense, this is now year 2 of Todd Monken's system. We'll have this exact same conversation next offseason with Zach Orr, year 2 of his system. But for Todd Monken, year 1 was definitely a feeling out and learning process. Now, they still had plenty of success, but they also had plenty of failures where they learned, and hopefully the biggest thing that they learned is to run the ball when it matters, right? I think that's priority number 1 for him. But in my opinion, the Ravens now have a better idea. Todd Monken has a better idea of how they want this offense to look. So they have a goal. They have an identity they want to shape. They want to build around. John Harbaugh essentially said as such during the combine. So this is make or break, because I'm not saying they can't adjust next offseason or make personnel moves to switch stuff around. It's always going to be a fluid system and a fluid personnel group. But this year two, I think, is kind of like, all right, we figured out what we want to do. We have a better idea. Now let's go make this thing work. And it's a building process, right? It's not just one offseason, and I'm not trying to say it is. And again, if the Ravens don't hit this offseason, it's not like their organization is over and they have to rebuild and trade everybody. As long as you have Lamar Jackson, you absolutely do have a chance. But at wide receiver, it's going to shape a little bit maybe what they do there. Zay Flowers is the only wide receiver on this roster after next season. Do they go out and trade for a guy like Courtland Sutton and have him as a long-term piece in this offense? Do they pick up Rashad Bateman's fifth-year option and see if he can give them a really solid year this year and make that fifth-year option worth it? On the offensive line, I sense a huge overhaul coming there. Probably at least one new starter, maybe two. We're going to see 4 new starters probably in the next 2 to 3 years, 3 being absolute max in my opinion. So it's all going to be defining for them. And we talked about how all last offseason it was so huge because of Lamar Jackson and that contract. And yes, it absolutely was. I mean, when you go into an offseason not knowing who your quarterback is and having all that uncertainty, yeah, it's nerve-wracking, first of all. I'm sure there were so many emotions. I mean, I went through them, you went through them, everybody went through them. But for the Ravens, that was such an important offseason because that was essentially, okay, is Lamar Jackson going to be the franchise guy here or not? Obviously, he was. So you could argue that offseason was more important than this offseason, but I want to take it in terms of circumstances where, yeah, the Ravens started to build around Lamar Jackson a little bit more last year with the weapons, with Zay Flowers and Odell, Nelson Aguilar, etc. But now you have to continue to build on that. You have to continue that momentum. Eric DeCosta, I think it's even more important this offseason that he hits on those veteran minimum signings like he did with guys like Jadeveon Clowney and Kyle Van Noy and Arthur Millette and Ronald Darby, all those guys. He has to do it again. He also has to hit on his draft picks. Last year's draft class, I mean, Zay Flowers did his thing. We all know that. But at the end of the day, who else from that draft class contributed? Tavius Robinson, he played some solid snaps, but it wasn't necessarily a big contribution class outside of Zay Flowers. Trenton Simpson was kind of waiting his turn, and Kyu Blu Kelly wasn't even on the roster, right? So Voorhees was injured. So we might see a bunch of year 2 leaps from guys. But I think with Lamar Jackson on this big deal, I think it's ever so important that the Ravens can maybe get a couple of immediate impact draft picks, not only in the first round or second round, but then you talk about maybe the 5th round or the 6th round. Well, they don't have a 6th round pick. So maybe the 7th round, they have 2 7th round picks, getting impacts from those guys. This is, to me, one of the more important off seasons in franchise history, just for direction's sake. Can the defense continue? And even the fact that they have so many talented free agents, they're going to lose guys, right? We know they're going to lose guys. Patrick Queen's expected to leave. Geno Stone probably as well. They're going to try. I mean, the salary cap going up helps. Just Madubuike, who signed an extension, that also helps the salary cap situation. But it's also how much of that money do you want to push down the line potentially, right? Because the Ravens have options in terms of restructures, extensions, and cuts. So for the Ravens, do they want to go on a path where they push mega loads of money down the line and have that be a problem in 4 to 5 years? Or do you maybe try to work with some stuff this offseason, but then make sure you have room next offseason and the next offseason? It's a balance. It's a really tough, delicate balance for Eric DeCosta and company. And I think that you still have to be aggressive this offseason. I think, again, they have probably 2 medium moves or 1 big move in them, and that's before re-signing their own guys and also making those smaller moves along the margins. But you have to hit on those moves, right? And the Ravens have been pretty good about, waiting out the market, finding guys that are fits for them. But there has to be a calculated aggressiveness, right? Don't just go in there and throw $75 million away on the first day for no reason. The Ravens don't do that. But they have to hit on their guys this offseason because they were the best regular season team. It's kind of, it doesn't feel like I guess it is hard to replicate something like that. Every season's a new season. We're not going to see that 2023 team again. That's what stings for a lot of people. But for 2024, hopefully they can get over that hump. Coming up in the second part of the show, though, we will talk more about free agency. It is officially here with the legal tampering period. We'll talk about targets, positions of need, and a lot more. Stay tuned. Plenty to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is sponsored by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up speed performance. Some superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. Well, the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Also, items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. We're back. Our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here on this Monday. It is Mock Draft Monday, but the focus is free agency as the legal tampering period starts today at noon p.m. Eastern time, 12 p.m. Eastern time. So a lot of moves, I'm assuming, are going to be happening on the first day. We're going to be covering it all here on Locked On Ravens. If the Ravens make a move, a big one, of course, we're going to be going live for that. Any big move we go live for here on Locked On Ravens. We put out shorts, bonus content, bonus episodes. So we'll have everything. If the Ravens lose a flurry of guys, we might go live for that. So again, the timing of free agency can be weird and things can happen really early in the morning, really late at night. So we'll keep you as up to date as we can here on Locked On Ravens, covering you 5 days a week plus bonus content. We're also, I'm personally going on the Ryan Ripken show at 12 p.m. today. We're going to start up around 12 p.m. We're going to do a live instant reaction free agent marathon over there on the Ryan Ripken show. So if you want that, be sure to subscribe over there as well. And also subscribe here on Locked On Ravens, both in YouTube and in audio form, or on YouTube, I guess, and in audio form. Same show, both audio and video. But let's talk more about free agency because it's always exciting. You know, you always get it's like nervous energy. I love personally, football, basketball, baseball, all sports. Free agency is some of the most electric offseason content you can have. And I'm really excited for it. And I mentioned how big of an offseason it was for the Ravens. Well, this free agent class is shaping up to be one of the all-timers. We just saw Eric Armstead get released by the San Francisco 49ers. Now, obviously, that's not a defensive line's not a need for the Ravens, right? They just got Justin Madubuike back, and they have a bunch of young guys and talented players on there. But you look at potentially in the safety market, Kevin Byard just signed with the Chicago Bears. But do you maybe go after a Jordan Poyer, a Micah Hyde? There are a bunch of other guys. Justin Simmons, I think, is going to get a pure starting job somewhere. But if Geno Stone leaves, you're going to be in the market probably for another third safety, and maybe one of those veterans can come in and fill a hole. But the position everybody's looking at has to be running back, right? Everybody's talking about running back in Baltimore right now. A couple of different ways of talking about it too, with both the potential outside guys coming in and the inside guys maybe going out. So we got an article from Jeff Rebeck at The Athletic who put together the recent rumblings that he has heard and said that the Ravens have done their homework on some of the top running backs in the free agent class. Mentioned Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, and Josh Jacobs by name. We also learned that the Ravens are very serious suitors for Saquon Barkley from ESPN, so that's interesting as well. And Jeff also said that if the price is right, the Ravens could pounce on one of those guys. And I'm not expecting the market for running backs to be a fast-developing one, and I'm not expecting it to be a super lucrative one either with how the position has kind of fallen off in recent years. So to me, I think that if you're looking at like a Derrick Henry, I expect his market to be anywhere maybe in the $6 to $10 million range, average annual value-wise. For guys like Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, guys who are looking for their first big long-term NFL paydays, I'd maybe put them more like the $9 to $13 million range. I think Derrick Henry is a very realistic option. He'd count as a medium move in my book. And I think that, look, Gus Edwards has been great in Baltimore for a really long time. Be really weird to see him somewhere else, honestly. J.K. Dobbins, phenomenal rookie season, uber talented, tons of potential, but the injury situation, we can't ignore what that is. My prediction is I don't think any running back returns who's a free agent for the Ravens this offseason. Edwards, Dobbins, or Dalvin Cook. I don't think any of those guys come back to the team. So I don't know what Baltimore's plan is. I've kind of outlined it before here on Locked On Ravens. If you've been in every day, or I say, go get a guy like Derrick Henry. You have Justice Hill, then draft a mid-round running back, right? 4th round, 5th round. And then from there, once Keaton Mitchell comes back, you can have your 4th, 5th round running back as your number 3. And then once Mitchell comes back, you can slot him in as your 4th guy and have Keaton Mitchell obviously move up and take on a bigger workload because he certainly earned it after last season. Offensive line's another big one. I'm honestly a little surprised that the Ravens haven't made any moves outside of the Madubuike extension at the time of this recording in terms of freeing up space. Now, again, they have time to make all this stuff happen. But again, Tyus Bowser, Ronnie Stanley, Morgan Moses, maybe a Patrick Ricard, right? They have some options there. You can restructure Lamar. You can talk about Roquan Smith and Mark Andrews, all those guys as well. But the Ravens right now sit right at the cap, right literally at that line. So we're going to have to see them make some moves. They can get to probably $20 or $30 million in cap space, as I've said before, but it's going to be interesting because on the offensive line, Jess Rebeck also said that Damian Lewis is a free agent from the Seattle Seahawks, and the Ravens actually were really mad that the Seahawks took him. It was 2 picks ahead of him. Now the Ravens, Rebeck obviously said they quote-unquote settled for Justin Madubuike, and that one worked out pretty well, I'd say. But maybe Lewis comes to the Ravens, a guy that, the Ravens, and we've talked about this a lot on this show. When the Ravens like a guy, they don't forget about him. We've seen it a lot. They've been linked to DeAndre Hopkins for years. That hasn't happened, unfortunately, but linked to Jadeveon Clowney, that worked out for him. Linked to Des Bryant for a little bit, draft-wise, that worked out for him. They always seem to always find their way to guys they've been linked to in some way, shape, or form. Not all the time, right? Not all the time, but you're talking about the guard position. Both John Simpson and Kevin Zeitler are free agents. Going to see what happens with those two guys. I'd expect maybe one of the two to return, and I'm not even saying that if Simpson comes back, he would start. But I would love to have Zeitler back, but if not, Lewis could slot in at one of those guard positions, and you maybe get a guy like Voorhees in there, Ben Cleveland. We'll see what happens. Tackle position, obviously Stanley's the big name to watch. Morgan Moses also could save you cap space, but Stanley's the big cap money saver, $15 million post June 1. But then you look at the defensive side of the ball. Corner-wise, do you add a veteran like a Stephon Gilmore? Do you take a chance on Trey White with his injuries? He wouldn't cost a comp pick. Chidobe Awuzie also, torn ACL, hasn't really been the same since that torn ACL. Is he an option coming over from a division rival in the Bengals? So it's possible. Edgewise, there are a bunch of those, I don't want to call them mid-tier guys, but guys that won't necessarily demand as much as a Danielle Hunter or a Bryce Huff. You're looking at like Zadarius Smith, round 3. It'd be very funny if that were to be the case. But like a Leonard Floyd, for example, there are quality edge rushers as well. Wide receiver, I don't see them adding one in free agency. Maybe a lower tier. I'm talking about I don't see them adding like Calvin Ridley or Marquise Brown. I'd rather them trade for Cortland Sutton, to be honest there. They've been linked to Josh Reynolds at a lot of different places in the offseason so far. Maybe he's an option. Detroit wide receiver. I'm not a big Gabe Davis guy. I wouldn't bring him in. So there are options, but the Ravens will probably have to add a veteran. I don't think Odell's going to come back. Seems like the most likely landing spot for him is either going back to the Rams or going to the Chiefs. Seems like both those options are on the table for him. I'm not saying it's impossible he comes back to Baltimore, but I don't know. I don't really see it as very likely at this point in time. We talked about Patrick Queen, talked about Geno Stone. Don't see those guys coming back. I expect the Ravens to keep at least one of Jadeveon Clowney and Kyle Van Noy, at least one of Arthur Millette and Ronald Darby, and then kind of let the rest of the stuff play out. I don't expect Tyler Huntley back. There are a couple other guys that, at this point I'm not really expecting back as well. So it's going to be a crazy offseason, not just for the Ravens. It's other teams are getting better, right? You have to make your team better while also combating the other teams in your conference or division, the league, that make themselves better. The Steelers, we talked about it. Russell Wilson goes to Pittsburgh on a 1-year, essentially $1 million deal. He's a better quarterback than a $1 million per year quarterback, right? The Broncos are paying $38 million of his salary. It's an upgrade from Kenny Pickett. That's a good move for the Steelers. Now, again, is he the best quarterback in the division? No, in my opinion, that's still Lamar Jackson. And Russell Wilson's not even close to Lamar Jackson. But that's an upgrade at a position where Pittsburgh saw a lot of mistakes last season. And not that Russell Wilson didn't make his fair share of mistakes in Denver, because, oh boy, he absolutely did. But Steelers upgrade right there, right? We're going to see the Browns and the Bengals. The Browns got Jerry Jeudy over the weekend. That's an upgrade. So you got to make your team better. Obviously, it depends on where you are in terms of competing versus not competing. But standing pat, I think, is one of the worst things you can do. Jaguars did it last offseason, and they had the same exact record, right? So got to make some sort of moves. I expect Eric DeCosta and company to do that, but not to necessarily do it in an overly aggressive way. I think they're going to, again, use what their strategy they've had And that's how they're going to probably do it this offseason. Coming up in the final part of the show, we're going to be switching gears a little bit, talking mock draft Monday. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot to get to on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. We're back. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on the day of NFL free agency, or at least the legal tampering period. Really exciting stuff. Really appreciate everybody again for tuning in today on Locked On Ravens and making us your first listen each and every day. We are free and available on all podcasting platforms. You can subscribe to us over on YouTube and in audio form wherever you get your shows. It's the same show, both audio and video, so you're not missing out on any content. You can follow me on social media, Twitter at ChaosStriker34, Instagram, trying to start that up at ChaosStriker34 as well. 5 days a week here on Locked On Ravens, plus bonus content, Ravens news, analysis, updates, and so much more. It is Monday, so that means we have to get into yet another mock draft Monday. Now, I did this one with needs in mind, and it's almost like a pre-free agency thing where I'm taking into account what the Ravens need right now. Obviously, even a week from now, when we do our next mock draft Monday, it's probably going to look a little different just because the Ravens will have probably added some guys or lost some guys. So we're going to be talking about everything that really the pre-free agency roster entails in terms of their actual needs here. And so I tried to run through it a little bit and tried to be strategic with it at least. Now, pick 30, I took J.C. Latham out of Alabama, and this is a pick that, to me, I don't think JC is going to be available at 30. I think he's probably going to go like top 15, top 20. But he's a guy, very big athletic profile, very physical. He's athletic. Now, in the run game is where he struggles. Pass pro, he's elite in pass pro, really good. But the run game is a little bit where he struggles. Now, a lot of his issues are correctable. You can talk about some foot speed stuff and this, that, and the other, hand placement. But I think that, you talk about best player available. This was absolutely a pick that, look, he's not going to be available here. You take what the mock draft gives you, and I'm 100% making that move. Then I ended up taking Xavier Legette out of South Carolina. And for me, a lot of people are on this train. Feels like a lot of people love this pick for the Ravens. And honestly, I don't even think he's going to be here. I feel like he's upped his stock, and I don't know, might go in like the 50s or so. I think he's put in a lot of places, the simulators. He's putting the simulators in like the 70s right now, but I don't know. He's a big bodied player. He's 6'1", 221, really good with his all around athletic ability. He's great at contested catches. Now, the run blocking's not incredible. He only really had 1 year of consistent production, but I think as a day 2 pick, I'm totally fine with taking this if you also add another veteran in there. So I was happy he was there, and honestly, I think it's a steal at this pick. I took 2 corners back-to-back in 93 and 129. First, Kalen King out of Penn State and Kyrie Jackson out of Oregon. Now, for Kalen King, he had a really, really rough combine. His draft stock, I think he was kind of talked about in like that very early second-round range. He had a really bad Senior Bowl. His season was honestly not great at Penn State last year. Yeah, it was almost like the Shaun Wade route where he opted to return to school, then it kind of backfired on him. I've seen people talk about him as like a 4th or 5th round pick. I took him in the late 3rd. I'm fine banking on the potential here of a Kalen King, and then Kyrie Jackson, I feel like gives you a super physical corner who I think one of those 2 guys at least is going to hit. Those are 2 really talented prospects. I'm okay with taking those 2 guys there. Javon Solomon's one of my guys. I might have taken him in every single one of my mock drafts, which I try not to do, but it feels like just the perfect mid-round edge rusher if they don't take a high-up guy. Obviously, the concern with him is Troy is not a Power 5 school. Can he do it against upper-level NFL competition and get those sack numbers? But boy, was he productive over there at Troy. Then I took Matt Goncalves out of Pittsburgh, the offensive tackle. And again, it's depth to offensive linemen here. The Ravens, we don't know how this offensive line is going to look in 2 years, right? I think they need to start stockpiling some young guys, see who hits, see who doesn't. Now, again, that doesn't mean just like overdo it with that, but I still think that this is a pretty solid value pick for me here. Mark Perry, I took the safety out of TCU at 228. For him, I think he's just an overall solid player. There are obviously areas he can work at, getting a little bit too aggressive in certain situations and this, that, and the other. But I still think that for him, it's almost like, I don't want to say Geno Stone replacement, but I do think the Ravens, if Geno Stone leaves, are going to be looking at a safety, whether it is in free agency or in the draft. Then I took Daijun Edwards out of Georgia. I think a lot of people, when you talk about Georgia, it's all about, the offense, but it wasn't necessarily about, about the running game, where Zamir White was there and James Cook was there. So he was behind a lot of people, finally got a shot, this season and produced really solid receiving back out of the backfield. Could be that mid-round, late-round running back I'm talking about. Have him be your third running back before Keaton Mitchell comes back. Then you can slot him in and just kind of take Edwards out of the fold if it is Edwards here. So I thought this was a pretty solid draft. I thought best player available was something I was really prioritizing here. And I feel like, based off of needs, I thought I hit all of them and didn't go too crazy with anything over there. Let's get to a couple of mock drafts, though, as we round out the show. We'll again get to them on Twitter here. And I put out this mock draft I do on the show on Twitter as Mock Draft Sunday. And then I say, put your mock drafts below to be talked about on our Monday show. I try to get to all of them. I see all of them, but I can't, unfortunately, get to all of them. So, again, I see it if it's there, but I apologize if I don't read it out here today. Let's get to one from Jordan here. I see Jordan so he actually traded here. All right, let's see the trade first. He said he trades the 2024 66th pick, 2024 90th pick, 2024 137, 2024 161 for 62, 129, and 164. I don't hate that value. I think, honestly, that's pretty solid value. I mean, you only move up 4 spots or so. Now I'm going to see the draft here. Oh, no, the Ravens trade back. Okay, so I like this value for the Ravens then. I was going to say, okay, the Ravens get all those picks. The Cardinals get all those picks. I like that value. The Ravens only move back 4 spots. It's technically around, but you move back 4 spots and you pick up the 90th pick. I do like that value. I was going to say I wasn't so sure about only moving back 4 spots there, or moving up 4 spots, but I read it wrong. So regardless, right here, Vlad McConkey, the wide receiver from Georgia, is the pick at 30. Brandon Dorlus, the edge from Oregon, at 66. Tyree Jackson, corner from Oregon, at 90. Christian Haynes, lineman from UConn, at 93. Marshawn Lloyd, running back from USC, at 134. Matt Goncalves, offensive tackle from Pittsburgh, at 137. Justin Eboigbe, out of Alabama. I might have butchered that name. I apologize for that. At 161. Jordan Travis, quarterback from Florida State, at 228. And Maurice Liufau, linebacker from Notre Dame, at 250. Jordan Travis is interesting, actually. I would not mind Jordan Travis. Obviously, he suffered the devastating injury at Florida State. There was a whole Florida State playoff controversy, but I would not mind that. I think Malik Cunningham probably has the backup job here, but put Jordan Travis. I don't know the recovery timeline for his injury, but I actually like that pick. It's not something I've thought about. So shout out to Jordan for that one. I think McConkey is going to be awesome. I think there are a lot of those wide receivers right in that 30 range, depending on who you like and who you don't like, whether it's Adonai Mitchell or Xavier Worthy or Troy Franklin. There are a lot of options there, and I think McConkey's certainly one of them. Now, Dorlus didn't have a great combine. I'm not sure if I'm taking him at 66, but again, it's almost like him, Braylon Trice. Those are the guys I'd consider there, but they both didn't have great combines. But I'm not necessarily just touting everything to a combine. I love Tyree Jackson. Talked about him earlier. And then again, you talk offensive line, running back, offensive line, defensive line. I think the needs are pretty much all set here. Now, I'm sure a lot of people, when you talk about the offensive line, 2 offensive linemen, maybe I'd take a running back. Well, running back in terms of maybe a little later. Maybe I'd flip, offensive tackle and running back. So you take 2 straight offensive linemen. But I like this one here from Jordan. Then we'll talk about one from Nicholas who says, keep Stanley. So Keon Coleman is the pick at number 30, wide receiver from Florida State. Braylon Trice, edge from Washington at number 62. Renardo Green, Florida State corner at 93. Javon Foster, offensive tackle from Missouri at 129. Dwayne Carter, defensive tackle from Duke, 134. Mark Perry, safety from TCU at 195. Jarius Monroe, corner from Tulane at 209. Carson Steele, running back from UCLA at 213. Omar Spates, linebacker from LSU at 228. Kyle Hergel, offensive guard from Boston College at 250. Keon Coleman was another guy I forgot in that group of wide receivers who could be good to go at number 30. I like Coleman. I know some people don't, but I do. Braylon Trice, I'd be fine taking him at 62. I think he wasn't going to be there at 62 when the Ravens picked before the combine, but I think he probably falls into that range now. And then corner, offensive line, defensive line. So I think the needs are hit here. It's first four are needs. Wide receiver, edge, corner, offensive line. Those are all needs. First four guys. Defensive line, more of a luxury pick. Safety, depending on Geno Stone, more of a luxury pick. Doubles down on corner here. Running back late. Linebacker depth. I like that. Offensive line depth again. I think this is a very needs-based draft, but I like the picks for the needs here for the Ravens. So really solid there from Nicholas. That's all I have for you here today, though, on Locked On Ravens. Really appreciate you tuning in to the show. Come up tomorrow or whenever we come back. Maybe the Ravens make a move today and we come back live streaming. We'll be talking about the latest free agency updates for the Ravens, also across the league as well. So be sure to stay tuned. I'll see you right back in tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.